flap, pustule, jowls, nugget, gurgle, smear, bulbous, pork.
If you hear certain words on the job site,
baloney,
work can be uncomfortable.
tender.
So at least get work gear that's comfortable. Timberland Pro work shirts, pants, and boots. Head to toe, Timberland Pro. Not uncomfortable.
Moist.
There's a giant cloud over the entire sport of college basketball.
That's pretty despicable stuff.
You guys know what I know.
No further comment?
I don't have any comment on that.
But Selection Sunday will have a much better handle on what's going on.
The status quo is not working.
No federal law needs to change. Only NCAA rules need to change.
We weren't competing for the playoffs. It was like, look, losing was our best option.
The NCAA is maybe the worst organization in sports.
I think we're at a point now where we protect the shooter more than the driver. Chicks dig the long ball, and that's what it's about.
What you see may change your perception of any sporting event. Get this, shoot this.
To tank or not to tank, how NBA teams are answering that question. More on that coming up. Welcome to Outside the Lines. I'm Ryan Smith in for Bob Ley. And another very large shoe is dropped in the seemingly never-ending chaos that is college basketball's FBI recruiting scandal. That's our big story today. Arizona's Sean Miller is the latest big-name college coach in the crosshairs. Sources familiar with the government's case telling ESPN's Mark Schlabach that the three-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year was captured on an FBI wiretap discussing paying $100,000 to make sure then-star recruit DeAndre Ayton signed with the Wildcats. Now, the university's response was to reiterate Miller's denial of knowledge of any alleged scheme to bribe players to sign with Arizona. And Miller himself touched on this last October after the arrest of assistant coach Book Richardson. At that time, Miller said he was devastated by the arrest.
I fully support the investigation into the allegations. And as that investigation proceeds, I'll continue to work hard to promote and reinforce a culture of compliance in our organization.
Now, since this news broke on Friday night, there hasn't been a dull moment in Arizona. Already one recruit is decommitted, Sharif O'Neal, Shaq's son, citing current events as the reason. And then Miller was a no-show for the team's loss against Oregon Saturday, saying in a statement, "I believe it is in the best interest of our team that I not coach the game tonight." But Ayton, a top candidate for National Player of the Year and a possible number one pick in this year's draft, was there, and the Oregon home crowd didn't make it easy on him. And this all follows Friday's bombshell from Yahoo Sports reporting that over 24 players and more than 20 Division I programs may have broken NCAA rules through alleged violations uncovered during the FBI's 3-year investigation into corruption in the sport. The allegations from documents and bank records secured during discovery from former NBA agent Andy Miller and his agency ASM Sports, detailing potential extra benefits for players and their families, possibly implicating programs like Duke, UNC, Kentucky, Texas, Michigan State, Alabama, among others. The benefits described in these documents range from allegedly buying meals for athletes, like Michigan State's Player of the Year candidate Miles Bridges, to paying players thousands of dollars to attend schools. Players like Markelle Fultz, Dennis Smith, Isaiah Whitehead, Bam Adebayo. Now all of them in the NBA, all allegedly receiving $10,000 or more. Now, naturally, college coaches of these named programs faced a slew of questions this weekend, and their responses ran the gamut.
I know nothing more than you guys know, and that's why there's no reason for me to speak on it. You guys know what I know.
Just no further comment. When we feel we need to comment it, whenever they finish that process, we will. But at this time, the plan is let's get ready for this game tomorrow.
As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, I have no reason to believe any member of my staff, the student athletes here, have violated any NCAA rules.
I know certain schools haven't held their guys out. That right now is an institutional decision. Eric has been advised to meet with legal counsel before he talks to anyone. We will go through the whole process, getting to the bottom of it, and we'll go from there.
And the NCAA and all this, they're in a tight spot. Its hands appear to be tied to an extent due to the continuing federal investigation. NCAA President Mark Emmert issued this statement on Friday. These allegations, if true, point to systemic failures that must be fixed and fixed now if we want college sports in America. Simply put, people who engaged in this kind of behavior have no place in college sport. So what's the plan to fix it? Emmert addressed this Saturday on CBS.
And we need to act and have changes in place before tip-off of next season. I think a failure to do that really will erode everybody's confidence in what this wonderful game is all about.
Change is needed. What is that change? I'm joined now by ESPN college basketball analyst Jay Bilas, who calls this scandal career-ending for Sean Miller. Clinton Yates also with us, senior writer for The Undefeated, who can also be heard on the Morning Roast Sunday mornings on ESPN Radio. All right, Jay, let me start with you. You think it's a career ender for Miller. Do you think he coaches another game at Arizona?
I would be surprised. I think, Ryan, you'd have to come forward and demonstrate that there's no truth to the report. And you can't imagine that if that was the stance that Arizona was taking in Sean Miller, that he would have sat out the game against Oregon. You're not seeing the same sort of denials from Sean Miller that you saw with regard to Andre Ayton playing in the game.
And Clinton, I think what's also surprising people about this scandal right now is you have a number of players that have been mentioned here. It seems to have taken anywhere from minutes to maybe hours for schools to decide whether or not to let guys play. Many of these players cleared. It took them that long to clear them. What do you make of that? It seems like a lot of speed considering some of the delays we've seen in other cases by NCAA schools accused of wrongdoing and people accused of wrongdoing this year.
Well, quickly with Sean Miller, I think one of the most interesting things about this is the possibility that he actually goes to prison for his involvement in that scenario, which is a separate discussion. As for the schools themselves, though, what reason would you have not to clear your players? Would you rather extend your run? Would you rather have to deal with the punishments after the fact? Or do you want to sit out and possibly not go as far? That's what the problem with this whole system is that the incentive to cheat, or rather to break the rules, is absolutely there. So what reason you would have other than some sort of moral high ground, which we know a lot of these schools are not standing on anyway, what reason would you have to follow the regulations and follow the rules? I would completely be clearing these kids to play if I were one of these schools because, hello, that's what you brought them there for. It makes sense.
Yeah, Jay, what do you think about this? Because in all of that, Clinton makes a great point, but then you wonder, where is the NCAA in all of this?
Well, I don't happen to agree that players were cleared in minutes or hours. It was done. All these clearances were made with compliance offices doing it, university council, and in consultation with the NCAA. So each school is responsible for ultimately making the call, but nobody did it on their own. It is fair to say, though, that with the NCAA tournament looming in the next couple of weeks, that the NCAA certainly moved with a lot more speed than they usually do. Usually the NCAA will say, well, it takes time, it's a long process, all that stuff, to make excuses for why they don't do something with deliberate speed. They did something really quick in this one.
Okay, so looking forward, we see this massive alleged misconduct. You wonder where the rules stand at this point. Jay, what needs to change? And we know we've talked a lot about paying players, but does something need to change in the rules right now to change all of this?
Oh, absolutely. It's needed to change for decades. As you know, Ryan, what's going on here, the actions that are underlying all this would not be federal crimes if not for the fact that they violated NCAA rules. And the government is taking a theory that the schools here are victims because they're federally funded institutions and because players were made ineligible according to NCAA rules. That put the schools at risk of losing money, not being able to properly allocate their resources, being the scholarships, or handle their assets, being the players. So the schools are seen as being the victims here. And so the NCAA has a couple ways they could go here. They can double down on the principle of amateurism and put more rules in and say, we really mean it this time. Or they can take a look at the fact that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And they can say, wait, hey, we need to let the players have agents. We need to let the players monetize their name and likeness or further with regard to amateurism and take this out of the realm of being a federal crime. And the other thing they need to do, and this is really disappointing, shows a total lack of vision. The fact that there is a commission on basketball and not on football and college sports in general. Because if people think this isn't happening in football, they are painfully naive. The same thing is happening in football. It may be a different delivery system, but we've had it. You've got agents in football. You've got payments made in football. It's the same thing, just a different method.
Yeah. Clinton, what do you think?
I think that what you saw Mark Emmert say in terms of if this is how people are going to operate, we have to get them out of our sport, is a clear indication that the NCAA has no intent whatsoever of making this right. Look, the regulations are one thing, and what you feel about whether or not they should pay players is another. But who are we talking about here? Clearly, everybody does this. You saw that from the graphic you guys showed on the number of teams that are involved with this. So for Emmert to act like it's just some sort of here and there situation is a clear indicator of how much they have their heads in the sand. It is really disappointing because this has become the story of the year. The NCAA tournament is going to look terrible if half these kids and half these schools can't play because of conference tournament stuff and all these other things. He's got to figure this out on a level that's more than just pointing the finger and saying that's the bad guy. You look at the situation that happened in Louisville all the way on down. This is a much, much bigger problem than just one agency and one particular guy paying 20 to 30 players or whatever it may have been.
Now you talk about the tournament, and you have to think, looking ahead, tournament coming up. Jay, is there a sense that whoever wins this, whether they're named or not, or let me ask you, what do you think the sense is of the team that wins the tournament this year? Will there be a question over them? Will people